Yes, the 2024 election is more than 2 years away, but Donald Trump does not want to wait. Sources are telling CNN that he's recently discussed a formal campaign launch this month, ditching plans to wait until after the midterms. One source says he knows that if he announces, he'll be center stage again. And Trump's discussions about running again come as bombshell testimony before the January 6th committee is shedding new light on his involvement in the Capitol insurrection. Testimony like this from former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson.
Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
And on top of that, her revelation that Trump knew his supporters were armed.
He was angry that we weren't letting people through the mags with weapons, what the Secret Service deems as weapons and our weapons. I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away.
Let's discuss all this and more with Laura Barone-Lopez of PBS NewsHour, Camila Duchas of Insider, and Jonathan Swan of Axios, and Jackie Kucinich of The Daily Beast. Welcome, Camila and Jonathan, to the Inside Politics Roundtable. It's good to be here with you guys. So, Jonathan, Trump is forcing Republicans to have this conversation about 2024. And right now, frankly, they just want some space.
Yeah, I mean, the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel, wants Trump to wait until after the midterms. The likely next Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, wants Trump to wait after the midterms. Mitch McConnell wants Trump to wait after the midterms. Trump doesn't care about what any of them say. Of course. Why would he? And so he's going to make his own decision. It may be this month, it may be after Labor Day. I think it's highly likely, based on the conversations I've had with people who work for him, that it's going to be before the midterms. And he's going to want to take credit for whatever happens in the midterms with Republicans. He's going to want the conversation to be about him. And here's the other important thing. He's going to want to make people choose, force people to choose. He's going to call the big donors. Are you with me? Are you with DeSantis? Mm-hmm. He's going to put people in this situation of having to choose.
He's kind of, I mean, in some ways you would think the January 6th revelations would be something that would force him to maybe take a step back. But with Trump,
why?
He's like, well, we're gonna put everybody on the spot. Are you with me or are you against me? And right now, there's also the possibility that he could have some challengers. I mean, Ron DeSantis is not staying at home and staying quiet. He's seems to be kind of laying the groundwork right now to challenge Trump.
Well, he's been the beneficiary of all of the negative news about Trump in these January 6 hearings and elsewhere. Every time a Trump challenger, a Trump endorsed person falls, everyone says, oh, man, does Trump still have the juice?
And DeSantis is looking good to some of these big money donors that Trump wants to keep.
Exactly, and has been noticeably quiet when it comes to defending Trump and getting behind him in the ways that you've seen some other governors and people who might potentially run for president someday. Senators are falling all over themselves to praise the president, and Ron DeSantis is just raking in the donors.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the fallout from January 6th, but just look at some of the quotes from people. I can't even say who they are because they're all unnamed and off the record. The New York Times, one trusted current advisor called the testimony a killer. CNN, the testimony will lead to indictments, this Republican lawmaker said anonymously. Enough to make me throw my lunch against the wall, said another person. And this paints a picture of Trump completely unhinged and completely losing all control. But nobody wants to say it. Very few people, I should say, want to say it on the record, which I think it gives Trump an opening.
Yeah, I mean, well, the big takeaway from that right there is that they're all anonymous, that they are not willing to put their name behind any criticism of Trump, which still shows his power that he has over the party. And also, the whole factor of him declaring earlier, part of that, I know that Trump is likely denying it, but part of that is probably because he's worried about facing criminal charges. If he runs, it complicates that. I mean, the Fulton County DA is potentially pursuing charges in Georgia against Trump and against his allies. If he were to run, that would muddy it for her if she were to try to go after him, with interfering in Georgia's election.
And Laura made just a really good point here, is that it's not just Fulton County, it's also the Justice Department is also conducting their own investigation. You have all this evidence coming out in light of January 6th. I mean, let's not forget that he can technically run from jail if he wanted to, but if he is convicted of just not getting, of constructing, of engaging in an insurrection, if he's convicted of that charge of violating the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, then it could stop him from
it could be. It could actually be disqualifying. I mean, how realistic do people around Trump or Republicans in general think the prospect is of actual criminal exposure for Trump? I mean, it seems that Georgia may be the most likely place where the biggest threat would come from.
It's hard to know because the truth is they're not going to be honest about that.
Sure.
I talked to, people who are on his, who are legal advisors to him, who are aides to him, who are advisors to him. I've never heard any actual concern from any of them, but that doesn't tell you whether there is actual concern. And he himself would never reveal that. Probably wouldn't even reveal it to his aides. It's just not the way he talks.
Yeah, he doesn't. He's a perennial optimist.
If ever I see,
I guess you could put it that way.
If ever I see a story saying Trump is freaked out about going to jail,
right.
I'm like,
be a little
I don't know about
skeptical.
that story.
Republicans wouldn't even admit to watching the hearings.
Sure.
Our Sam Brody at the Daily Beast did a piece, and he went around the Hill and asked Republicans what they thought of them. And seriously, he got 3 of them, I think, out of a dozen to say that they actually were watching the hearings at all. So legal
My
exposure.
favorite quote, I saw something, I would probably get it slightly wrong, but there was like a quote in one, it said like, the fear factor is gone, said an anonymous, whatever.
Right.
Interesting.
So, I mean, speaking of fear and lack of fear, Liz Cheney, she is running for re-election against a Trump-backed opponent. Just take a listen to what was going on at her debate this past week, where she is not backing down from really going hard against the big election lie and former President Trump.
What people are concerned about in terms of the J6 committee is it's just totally unfair.
We need to recognize that if we are not faithful to the Constitution, if we embrace lies, if we embrace the lies of Donald Trump, if we tell the people of Wyoming something that is not true, we will soon find ourselves without the structure and the basis and the framework of our constitutional republic.
And Cheney also dropped a bit of a bomb at the end of this past week's hearing, warning Trump and people around him, like the former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, to not tamper with her witnesses. She basically said, we have the text messages where people are trying to influence. Cassidy Hutchinson, CNN sources, are saying that some of those messages were sent by people close to Mark Meadows. So, I mean, what does this kind of portend for the future of the January 6th hearings? I mean, A, witness tampering is a real problem, but B, I mean, people seem to be worried enough that they are willing to tamper with the witnesses to get them to not testify.
I think it definitely lays out possible charges that could come against Trump or his associates. You see witness tampering. There's also been them laying out evidence of potentially him obstructing an official proceeding. I mean, we've counted at least 4 federal crimes that he could have possibly violated. So I think when you see this latest evidence of witness tampering, that's very real. I've talked to a former federal prosecutor who tries cases of witness tampering. He says that you really do need to prove Trump's intent and if he knew that these calls were taking place and what was going to be said on these calls to really charge Trump and put him in connection with the witness tampering.
And I thought it was so interesting that Michael Cohen, Trump's longtime lawyer, said to the Washington Post this week after that hearing that these are mob boss tactics.
Which he should know because he was previously involved in it for quite some time.
Which he used.
He was a part of it. He was a part of all of it, but he knows Trump well, and because he worked for him for so long. And, I mean, clearly Congresswoman Cheney and a lot of other members of the committee are trying to present this to the Justice Department as illegal tactics, because just look at their language. I mean, she and others say it over and over again in the hearings: illegal, illegality, and she's framed it, very starkly this week as trying to tell voters we either have to pick the Constitution or you pick Trump.
And she is making her re-election bid about that, which I think is really notable. And by comparison to the rest of the Republican Party, I think fairly courageous as well.